And that goes on. And meanwhile, the law is being used to concentrate money in the hands of the party cadre. It's being used to concentrate control in the hands of those who answer to the executive, in this case, Obama. And it's being used to consolidate the legislative process to be unchallenged in the hands of the party cadre working with it. Right? And that, of course, eventually sets it up so that you start to be able to pass laws that violate the Constitution.
As now, because this is exactly what Chavez and Lula have done in Venezuela and Brazil.
Well, I would say I'm talking, but I'll be interested to hear about that, because it seems to me that we're watching something unprecedented in the history of America. People keep trying to draw parallels with FDR and so forth. No. Because everything done in FDR's time was done not only within the framework of, but with the cultural assumption that you could not go beyond certain boundaries. No such assumption exists, partly at least because Americans are now ignorant of what the boundaries ought to be. They have no idea. So, the other day, the Senate, and it looks like it may pass the House, passes a bill dealing with something that has been a controversy in America for my whole lifetime. Should the District of Columbia have representation in the Congress? According to the Constitution of the United States, a separate district was created to be the seat of the federal government. And that district was to be run by the Congress, right? They were essentially the legislature and lawmaker for that district. They set up its various functions, and etc. Now, I know, if you go back and study the founding, you know why they did that. They did that so that no state government would have undue influence over the national government. They didn't want any state to be able to exercise the kind of influence that could come from being able to make the everyday lives of all the legislators and officials miserable, right? So they wanted a separate district to keep the federal government independent of any undue influence, especially since where they wanted to put the capital was next door to Virginia, and Virginia, being the largest state at that time, was the one that would have exercised that kind of undue influence. It did so kind of naturally. But obviously, over time, you've got a big city here, you've got hundreds of thousands of people who, in terms of what goes on in other states and locales, they don't have any government. They don't have a state government. They don't elect a governor, and they don't have a senator or a congress. So over the years, they've agitated that we should be represented. And it's a hard argument to deny in America, since we began with the slogan, no taxation without representation, right? So you should be represented in the legislature that taxes you. But it was assumed that to do this, you had to get a constitutional amendment, right? Not only assumed, it's pretty clear. Because the only people who can have representation in the Congress are people who are elected by the people of the several states. So you must be a state in order to be represented in the House. Or you must be a state in order to be represented. Well, the District of Columbia is not a state. So over the years, there have been several moves to get an amendment passed and so forth. They've always failed. For one reason or another, you can't get enough of the states to agree that the District of Columbia should be a state. And so it fails. This time they decided they'd just throw the Constitution out. They have passed a bill to grant the District of Columbia representation in the House. Now, on the surface, on the substance of it, I'm not sure I would say no to that. Though I probably would, but I'm not sure I would. What I say no to is a procedure that allows them to act as if the Constitution doesn't mean it. And they've already put a president in place, acting as if the Constitution doesn't mean anything. He's spitting on it every day. And now they take another little step to act as if the Constitution doesn't mean anything. When he reached for the census in 2010, the Constitution mandates a census. It is actually to be conducted under the oversight of the legislature, right? And it's obvious why. The founders of this country were coming out of an era when they looked at England and saw a king, and that king maintained his power by corrupting the legislature with rotten boroughs and by appointing people who would then make the laws according to what he wanted. So they wanted to make sure that the President of the United States would not be in a position to corrupt the legislature. So when it came time to decide how many people lived in each state or in each district, since the House is based on population, right? Each district, you assign the representation based on population. You could actually, by manipulating the census, right? You can create new House seats that shouldn't be warranted by pretending you've got enough population in a given district to warrant it. You can increase the population in as they're reapportioned in districts where you know there's going to be more Republican representation, so that in point of fact those districts are hollow. The Republican is sitting in the district, but he doesn't really represent as many people as he should. And you can thereby have more representation from the Democrat district. Although by the time you're done, you could take over the Congress of the United States. You could pack it with your representatives by playing with the census. So what does Obama do practically the first day he comes into office? He issues an executive order saying that the census will be taken out of the Commerce Department and put under the control of the White House. Now, of course, in point of fact, without a piece of legislation, because the Congress determined that it would be under the supervision of the Secretary of Commerce, the one Judd Gray was supposed to be, and that therefore, of course, it is going to be under the constant oversight of the legislature, because all of the cabinets and agencies are. But no, Obama wants to take it out of the Commerce Department and put it in the one part of the government where the Congress doesn't have the right to look at what's going on. And people think this is an accident. No, it's not. It's a piece of the puzzle. Because that, too, is an element of what's required to consolidate power in the hands of a party dictatorship.
They have been planning this for 40 years.
I think so. And it looks like they're moving along speedily. And I noticed the other day that, what did the story say? They cautiously welcomed the result of the so-called referendum with Chavez. This, by the way, after we saw that one of the first things that happened after Obama was elected is one of the Democrats introduced a bill into the Congress to start the process of repealing term limits for the president. Here.
Here?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And
You're running fast.
They are running fast. See, and what most Americans don't know is what they're running toward. Because, think about it, there hasn't been a public, political, clear discussion that went out into the sort of popular body of the people. There hasn't been a discussion that included a frank discussion of communism and what it is. And what is it now? It's more than 20 years. Right? Because you're talking about something that would have been front and center, what's more than 20 years, in the election of 1980, when Reagan first came in. By the time you got to 84, we were sort of distracted, and once the Bush people came in, they adopted the view that it's impolite to call people communists, so you don't do it. And it's impolite to say something is communist, so you don't do it. Right? So it's walking like a duck, and it's quacking like a duck, and it's swimming like a duck, but you mustn't call it a duck because your name called it. It's crazy. It's crazy. We're being, in terms of public discussion and psychology, the American people are essentially being stripped, disarmed. Because once you can't talk about the truth, once you don't have the language in which to discuss it, what do? How can you communicate? The danger, David.